So, the last topic I want to cover in bringing species back from the brink is about as far as you can go from bringing species back from the brink, and that's called de-extinction. Um, and it's literally reversing extinction, like globally extinct species. This is a huge hot topic in conservation. There have been whole TED conferences on this. There's a whole National Geographic issue devoted to this. And the idea is to use high-tech solutions to bring species back from extinction. Um, so far, there are no solid successes, meaning that there is not a species that's been brought back to life with biotechnology. But there's been enough successes to show that it might be feasible. And people are working very hard and pouring a lot of money into this sort of high-tech solution. Now, I've got two videos that you'll see after my video. But I want to give a little bit of background to go with this. So we can clone species already. So you'll remember probably learning in your biology class in school about cloning, how we clone sheep. We've been working on cloning other things. So they have cloned a batang, which is a type of wild cattle. And so this is potentially possible with the technology used for cloning. Another example, one thing they've been working on pretty hard is doing gastric brooding frogs. These are really weird frogs that went extinct in Australia, and you can see there's a picture here of a specimen, meaning it was dead, and they preserved it for a museum or a science collection. And this is a species that went extinct relatively recently. It's a really weird, unique species of its own lineage. There's nothing else closely related to it. And what they did was they tried to implant nuclei into other frog eggs that they removed the nuclei from, and they actually got cell division. And so that's the first step. And I think that something like an amphibian might be a good place to go, because anything that kind of just leaves its eggs in water might be easier than a mammal. So if there's a mammal and you created an embryo of an extinct species, you need another species that can carry the young of that and give birth to that. We don't quite have the technology down to have a artificial placenta or anything else like that. Other species people are really interested in are the dodo, the heath hen, the Tasmanian devil, and the quagga, which is that zebra-looking thing that went extinct that we mentioned earlier on. They've even gone so far as to talk about woolly mammoths, which is why you see pictures of them on these events, because there is evidence that people caused their extinction. A passenger pigeon that we've talked about a lot in this class is one that they're also working on. And you can think about some different questions about why to do this, when do you think it's appropriate. So normally in class we would have a full discussion about this, but I want to pose some questions for you to think about. First of all, I usually try to get people's initial thoughts. And you can pause this here so you can kind of collect your thoughts and think what your initial thoughts and gut reactions are. But usually there's a spectrum of responses from people that are like, oh my God, this sounds amazing, let's do it, to, I don't know, this seems pretty interventionist, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of ethics questions about this. Should scientists bring extinct species back? From a conservation biology perspective, it's more important, I think, to ask whether we can create viable populations. If we're creating one individual? Are we going to be able to make enough individuals and insert enough genetic variability for us to create a population? Because to really bring a species back, we want it to be possible to get to a place where we don't have to constantly work on its conservation or constantly make decisions and intervene. We want it to be able to persist on its own. And it's hard to think that we could go from no individuals to a viable population. Perhaps if there are enough specimens from enough different areas that genetic information could be extracted from, we could create a viable population. We also need to know that the habitat is still there and how it would interact with other species. Other questions are whether de-extinction projects will affect funding for other conservation projects. We've talked about in this chapter how conserving species in their already existing habitat is usually much more cost effective than reintroductions. You can spend a ton more money on a reintroduction. So you can imagine that the amount of money that would be needed to do all the biotechnology to create a captive population and then to do the reintroduction, the amount of money would be a lot. And so there are questions about how much of a good idea it is to put money towards this, to bringing extinct species back, or how it would be better to put money towards on-the-ground conservation for existing species that we might be able to prevent going extinct. So just some things for you to think about. I'll be interested to know what your opinions are. And I'll probably put a test question asking you about that. So make sure that you spend a little bit of time to think about what you think about this and what reasons back up what your opinion on this is. So that's the end of this chapter. So there you go.